Hey guys, this is Ben CB for RaiseYourEdge.com. Welcome to the second update. In this video I will talk about range constructions or range adjustments at the stack size of or between 12 and 20 big blinds. If you haven't watched the first update yet, I highly recommend doing it now. So pause the video now and watch the first update. Because I'm gonna explain there why I'm doing those updates. And yeah, so I would say we jump right into the action. First, I will just give a quick recap about the most common mistakes, and then we will jump right into the range construction, or rather how you should design your ranges at 12 to 20 big blinds. So typical mistakes. I'm not explaining it too detailed since I made an entire video course about 12 to 20 big blinds where I explain very in detail what kind of mistakes people are doing in general, and I'm also explaining those mistakes very detailed. So I just want to name a few. First, pretty much the most common mistakes: ranges are too static. They're just playing like a robot, their ranges, and they're not really adapting to the present lineup on the table. A very high raise fall gap. It is now more important to look for not raise folding too many hands, since our opponents are getting a good price for their rejam. If you just compare, for example, 13 big blinds, they're risking a 13 big blind stack to win the dead money, whereas with 20 or 23 big blinds, they're obviously risking way more to win the same amount of dead money. So keep that in mind. You don't want to have a too high raise fold gap, but most players don't. Third point, they have really bad or no limping strategy at all. We will talk about that later more in detail as well. Over adoptions versus resteals. This is basically the case when student or people are overestimating stats. So if they have only a little sample size and they see the player has been 3-betting 2 or 3 times within 15 hands, they already start making tremendous over adaptions based on such little sample size. Don't do that. You want to have at least 30-40 hands to start making little adjustments, maybe calling one hand loser, or if you have a tough decision that you have a tendency you can work with, but you never want to make tremendous adaptions or adjustments based on 30 or 40 hands. No, this little sample size only helps you in situations where you're not sure whether to call or fold, and then you can use that tendency. But you don't want to change your entire strategy based on a few hands. Wrong hand selection, especially when it comes to open raising. See many students open raising hands like pocket fives or fours or even sixes from under the gun with 18 big blinds, which makes absolutely no sense, or suited connectors. The power of those hands comes when playing deeper, or when we are at late positions, or sometimes middle position, when we have a stack size where we can open jam those hands. But in general, we don't want to play them post flop with a shorter stack size around 12 to 20 big blinds. Also, too loose from under the gun, raising too many hands, especially this is similar to the wrong hand selection. That goes hand in hand. Raising too much from under the gun, probably because of raising too many pocket pairs and suited connectors. Also, too many off-suited aces from early and middle positions. Again, we don't want to open raise too loose in these days anymore. People are aware of defending their big blind quite frequently, and that's why we need to adapt in these days. We're not going to talk about preflop raise sizings, so we will jump right into the range construction. So I prepared some ranges for you. This is the first range under the gun. Quite tight, very solid. Blue is open raising, red is are those hands we want to open jam. You don't necessarily have to open jam those. It's just an idea how you can construct your range. The yellow ones are potential hands you can additionally open raise if the lineup allows it. So if button and cutoff are quite tight or passive, and the blinds are very weak, so recreational players, let's call them targets or spots, table spots, then we want to increase our open raising range, and you can even go down to 9-8 suited, King 8 suited, and limp those hands. But under the gun is the position where we can't make tremendous adjustments. We can definitely make some little adjustments here, and you should definitely know when to adapt and how to adapt. Also, if I feel like that button and cutoff are super call heavy, I also start limping hands like Jack 10 suited, Queen 10 suited. Which is totally fine. So hijack. Hijack we're already open raising a bit looser, roughly 19%. I mean the yellow ones are only potential hands, so it's 20.51 minus 1.21%. So the range we definitely play here is around 19%, which is quite solid. As you can see, now we're gonna open jam hands like 6s and 5s for 14 big blinds and less. Pocket 4s, 3s, deuces are very, very marginal in most situations, so I want to rather fold them. I know they're often Nash jumps, but if you look at the EV is often around 0.05 or something like that. And with a stack size of 14 big blinds or 13 big blinds, we don't need to take those spots. Only if you're playing a very, very tough table. But when you look at the calling ranges, they, especially against 14, 13 big blind jams, they're quite tight. So if there's only one player calling a pocket pair or suited ace looser, the jams already get quite minus EV. So yeah, other than that, the range looks quite good to me. The first hands I would fold for sure if I think button and cutoff are too sticky, ace 9 off, king 10 off, or rather limp those hands. Again, you can make adjustments to both directions, either raising tighter or adding more hands into your limping range, like 10-9 suited, Jack-9 suited, even from those positions. Or you start open raising lighter, like King 8 suited, Queen 8 suited, Jack 8 suited, 10-8 suited, 8-7 suited, Jack 10 off, if button and cutoff are very tight, or even just tight and there's a spot present in the blinds. Yeah, King Queen suited, definitely both options fine, open jam and min raise with less than 14 big blinds. The jam is quite profitable, but also if there are spots in the blinds, you want to rather open raise it and play post flop against them. One basic rule when making a decision between open jam and open raising, if you have a very, very profitable jam with, let's say, 14, 13 big blinds, you can do it. If it's marginal, you rather want to open raise it. So it doesn't necessarily, or rather, it doesn't really matter what stack size you have. You always want to look at the EV. The EV is pretty much that where the money comes from, and we don't want to make negative EV plays for obvious reasons. There are some exceptions, for instance, future game. If you remember, if we are short stack and we want to avoid losing our fold equity, we want to keep our fold equity alive, it is totally fine to make slightly minus EV jams, or even more or less more clear minus EV jams. Same counts for overtaking the chip lead. So if we know, okay, the jam is very, very marginal and I actually would open min raise or limp instead of open jam most of the time, but if the jam gets through and we overtake the chip lead and we can abuse the bubble, it is totally fine to make the jam since ICM is not considering any future game. So this is totally fine. Even if you turn on the future game simulation, in my opinion, it doesn't consider future game enough. It is really powerful when we are short stack, but in my opinion, it doesn't it doesn't consider enough the benefits of being a big stack within the next orbits or in the next orbits. I would basically never jam suited aces here with 13 big blinds roughly from hijack. They are at best case slightly profitable. I don't see any reason to do it. So yeah, other than that, looks quite reasonable. Ace check off here with 15 bigs, totally fine to jam. Very, very profitable jam. Needs a lot of protection. Min raising and calling it off against pretty much any position is fine as well. I mean, against the tight cutoff, if the regular is very tight, you can raise fold it for 50 bigs, but with less than 50 big blinds, we have to raise call it off almost every single time. Let's go to the cutoff. As you can see, we open raise quite a few offsuited aces. If the button is very call happy and there's one aggro sitting in the blinds, of course I'm more likely to fold these hands. But if the button is not aggro at all, it's totally fine to open raise these hands here. We shouldn't open raise any offsuited ace. You can go tighter with the offsuited aces for sure. And now we can open jam almost any pocket pair with less than 15 big blinds, even 8s and 7s. I mean, you can open min raise it, but I really want to open min raise it only when I know that two players at least are very aggressive sitting behind and they're gonna rejam any pair, any suited ace on me, and maybe crap hands like 8-6 suited, 6-5 suited, so that the EV of min raise calling gets higher, even though I let the big blind realize quite a lot of equity because he can obviously defend and see a free flop. But in general, the superior play is mostly jamming deuces to 8s here with less than 15 big blinds, because we have a very profitable jam, and then we go for it. Same with king queen, king jack, queen jack suited. Very, very profitable jam. It really sucks to raise for those hands, but in general, I rather want to open raise them, especially if there's a recreational player sitting in the blinds. As you can see, every single hand we play, even though it's a very profitable jam, we want to see, or we want to take a closer look who's sitting in the blinds. If there are 3 regulars sitting behind, I just jam it, because there is not so much value in playing these hands post flop. I mean, the regular, even though we have a slight edge on him, he will not completely misplay the majority of his hands that king queen suited will benefit from open raising the hand. So obviously he might do a slight mistake here and there, but in general, letting him realize, or speaking about the big blind, letting him realize his equity is not good for our EV. So also, we let the small blind and button rejam hands which they would have folded against our open jam. So hands like suited aces, low pocket pairs, even hands like jack 10 suited, 10-9 suited, and even a hand like king jack suited. We are with his king jack suited, king 10 suited, he's folding out our king queen suited. We cannot raise call with 15 big blinds cut over his button, even against the blinds. If they're just rejamming suited aces and pocket pairs, we cannot raise call. Against the most players, or against the population tendencies, we probably have to raise folded. And the yellow hands, again, potential hands we can add in our range if there's any tendency of players being quite tight sitting behind us. If we have around 10, 11 big blinds, it's totally fine. Start jamming hands like ace deuce suited up to ace 8 suited, maybe and ace 9 offsuit as well. But with more than 12 big blinds, I'm definitely not jamming these hands. Yeah. Or queen 10 suited, king 10 suited, very profitable jams with 10, 11, even 12 big blinds. Let's have a look at the button. Where's the button? Here's the button. So if you compare the button's range here with the button's range of the quote-unquote old cores, you can see we are way tighter. Also, there are only a few connected hands. I mean, the point is we cannot open raise that much. If we're raising too much, our opponents can literally rejam any 2 cards against us, and they would have very profitable any 2 rejams against us. Also, you have to differentiate between 13 big blinds and 19 big blinds. With 19 big blinds, 20 big blinds, we can definitely open raise smoother, let's say 43%, 44%, than with 13%, where I would probably open raise somewhere around 36%. So you have to bear that in mind. Don't see this range here as carved in stone. No. Again, if someone rejams with 13 big blinds, he's risking less than compared to 20 big blinds. And we have to raise call more, or our raise fold gap has to be smaller with 13 big blinds compared to 20 big blinds. So here with 13 big blinds and less, we can open jam ace-9, ace-10 off, the suited aces. Here the suited broadways, king-queen suited. I'm raise calling with probably 15 big blinds and less anyway. The off-suited aces, you can obviously open jam with 10, 11, even with 12 big blinds. But with 13 big blinds, the low off-suited aces, they're showing not such a huge profit. So I rather put them into my raise folding range. Also, very important, if you have an aggressive opponent in the blinds, I already mentioned it in the first update, start limping first. Start limping first and look how your opponents are reacting against your limps. Because there are a lot of opponents or players who are very aggressive against open raises but quite passive against limps. They're just completing behind, they're checking behind. So it's often a very powerful counter strategy to be passive. Not necessarily tight, no, just passive. Especially on lower stakes and mid stakes, even on high stakes, when players have problem with their ego, they just feel attacked when you open raise their blinds. They feel like, oh, this idiot is raising my blind again, I want to play back, yada yada yada. And then you get into that level war, and then you don't know if he's adapting against you. You don't know if it's just variance, and then you start open raising tighter even though he just had hands, and you want to figure out first if he's really aggressive or if he just had hands, or if he's just aggressive against your open raises. So the first adaptation you make is you start limping more hands. I mean you can already do it against an opponent you've never been playing before against. You play against him in that very tournament for the first time, and within the first 3-4 orbits he 3-bet against you twice, and then he rejammed against you. Now you're on the bubble or forehanded, and then you can already start limping. Or even if he's playing on another table as well, or you're already playing against him the entire session and you already figured he's 3-betting against you a lot, he's rejamming you against you a lot. So it's sort of a situation where it's a little bit of rock, scissors, paper happening between your two strategies, and you don't know really where you stand. So just stick to your plan, start limping, and if he starts ISO raising against you limps, then you probably know, okay, this guy is just playing back, or he's just aggressive. He might be just a maniac or aggressive. He just has an aggressive style in general, and he's not necessarily playing against you. Ego has no business at the poker tables. Keep that in mind. Okay, yeah, but the range looks very, very solid, very, very good. Again, you have to adjust to big blind, and small blind is also very important here. Way more important compared to the situation when we are between 20 and 25 big blinds, because now he can rejam more. He's getting a way better price, and most players are rejamming more. And you have certain players who are rejamming any ace, any Broadway, any pair, the strongest suited connectors. And if you're playing against the same regulars and they have a 3-bet stat of 20-25% over, let's say, more than 100 hands, then you should probably adjust and open raise tighter, or rather start limping then. So small blind, since he will rejam more than compared to 20 to 25 big blinds, have an eye on him. Still big blind, very important. He can defend a lot. If he's passive, not aggro at all, adjust and open raise more. You can go up to 50 or 60%. Right, let's have a look at the small blind. Again, I'm going to show you a mixed strategy. If the big blind is tight, passive, yada yada yada, just play open raise only. There's no reason to have a limping range at all. If the guy is not defending his big blind enough, we have probably profit with any 2 cards we can open raise if he's defending more or less than 60% of his big blind. I mean, we shouldn't open raise any 2. Think about meta game. You don't want to destroy your own edge. If you raise 3 or 4 times every single orbit into his big blind, he might feel offended, he might feel exploited, and they just do some kind of impulse play and play back, even though they don't really know. They just feel like they're gonna get exploited. So I call it cooperative play. So even though you have a hand you can open raise, give him a walk in the 3rd orbit or 4th orbit, instead open raising every single time into his big blind. I mean, not a strong hand, but let's say if you have a border hand like Jack 7 off or 7-6 off, or like, I don't know, 6-5 off, just fold it. Okay, here light blue limping, the orange is push with less than 13 big blinds. Again, if the guy is very aggressive, very sticky, the play would be jamming more hands here. All the suited kings, even queen 5, queen 4, queen 3 suited are very profitable jams with less than 13 big blinds, blind versus blind, 5 or 6-handed. Also in many 4-handed situations. So yeah, then you have to jam more. And obviously, if the guy is passive and tight, you want to jam less. You want to play low variance. You don't want to put in your stack in situations where raises have way higher EV or limping, and you can just grind. You can just grind your opponents, grind them down. 14, 15 big blinds, also fine to open jam the offsuited aces. Again, I always try to avoid jamming so deep, but it is obviously, those are profitable jams. But this is not the topic of this course, that we will speak about what ranges to jam. This is part of the push or fold course, which you should have that course. If you can watch this course here, you probably have the entire Sit Go course, and you have all 7 courses. So then have a look there. You should analyze hands in ICMizer and Hold'em Resource Calculator every single day you play anyway, so that you will get a feeling for the ranges. You get a feeling for certain stack sizes, how to adapt your ranges to certain stack sizes, yada yada yada, which is actually the key for sit and goes. The only exceptions where I also jam quite with deeper stacks are pocket pairs, here with less than 20 big blinds. Again, they're very, very profitable, and then I don't care how deep I am, because if it's very, very profitable play, and I know, okay, open raising with pocket 5s with 18 big blinds, and then you play a single raise pot with a hand like 5s, apparently it sucks. Alright, last but not least, very important, again, I already mentioned it in the first update, those ranges only adaptable for 5 and 6-handed, also occasionally for 4-handed situations, but when playing 4-handed we often have situations where the risk premium is very high, and we obviously want to take that into considerations at all, and then the ranges change tremendously anyway. And this is when it comes to your knowledge about jamming ranges, calling ranges, considering the risk premium, etc. pp. That's it for the second update. If you have any questions, feedback, bencb@raiseyouredge.com, or on the forum, let me know. If you have questions, let me know. If you don't agree with any kind of ranges, let me know. That's it for today, and I hope you learned something, or I hope you learned a lot. And then see you guys. Bye bye. That was BenCB for RaiseYourEdge.com.